All right, so we have a severe weather threat coming up. La Nina flexing its muscles, some long-range stuff to talk about. Active storm track setting up for some. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. Help the channel to grow. So here we go. We can see that La Nina. See the cooler waters there across the equator there in the Pacific. So that is a La Nina. We are in a La Nina right now, and it's definitely flexing its muscles. So whenever you have a La Nina, typically what you see because of the jet stream pattern in a La Nina is usually you see that the colder weather in the winter months focus more in the northwest and the northern plains, warmer, milder to the east, warmer in the southeast. So we'll take a look at that, and I think that's what we're going into here. Also, the MJO right now in phase 4, headed towards phase 5, phase 6. And then maybe into 7. And so those are warm phases on the east. And typically that's when you see that cooler or colder weather in the northwest or the western part of the country. So, those two things lining, I think this is a pretty good high confidence forecast here, at least over the next, maybe 10 to 14 days. And beyond that, I think it's going to get interesting as we go towards the latter half of February and into March. So we'll talk about that as well. But let's go over to the GFS ensembles. You can see what I'm talking about. So here's the 500 millibar pattern for 5 days. Let's go days 6 to 10 here. So this is really the first week of February, and you see that, right? You see that trough settling in, over the western part of the United States. We got above normal height. So generally, when you see that, you're gonna have warmer conditions. So that's the eastern part of the country. But we still have our tropospheric polar vortex there sitting over the Hudson Bay, so there's going to be plenty of cold air. It's just going to be angling different or coming into the United States at a different angle than it was really over the last few weeks. And we still have our negative EPO there, which is interesting. So it's not that different of a pattern than what we've been in. It's just everything's kind of shifted out towards the west as La Nina is really starting to flex its muscles. And then as we go towards, let's put this to day 12 to 16, similar type of pattern still, right? With that trough dumping into the west, the ridging in the east. But look at that big ridge up into Alaska. We just don't have that west coast ridge to really push that cold air to the east. So it just kind of dumps in and settles into the western part of the country. But we have some ridging over into the Arctic. So it looks like, the AO, the Arctic Oscillation going negative, trying to build in those negative NAO regions. So possibly interesting pattern as we go through, into the second part of February, especially if we get that MJO going into phase 7. Maybe around this time, phase 7 is still a little bit warm in the east, just not quite as warm. And then 8 turns cold. 8, 1, 2, 3 in February cold. So if we get that MJO to kind of do the full cycle there and get back into those colder phases, with what we're seeing here with the tropospheric polar vortex over the Hudson Bay, negative EPO, negative AO, things could turn drastically different as we go in towards the second part of February and into March. But with the La Nina flexing its muscles, it's going to be a battle. So it's definitely an interesting pattern. I think over the next 10 to 14 days, this is the pattern that we're looking at here. And it's beyond that, then we have more doubt and more skepticism in the forecast. Let's go to the European so we can see what's going on at the surface here. All right, so this is now tomorrow. So we have a severe weather threat. So places that saw a major snowstorm just last week, now a threat for severe storms, particularly Louisiana, southern Arkansas. Main threat's going to be wind, but can't rule out a couple tornadoes and some hail as well. So quite a different week in terms of weather for that part of the country. Then what you'll notice is with that trough in the west and then that ridge in the east, the storm track's really going to kind of set up across the middle part of the country here, as you can see that on the European. And this is now February 6th. Then we have another storm forming here February 9th. So that's where I think our storm track is really going to set up over the next 10 to 14 days. And the European has another storm forming towards the end of the run here, and kind of wants to keep that a little further south with a little more of a cold press coming in. So a snowstorm there on the European for the mid-Atlantic, the northern mid-Atlantic, we'll see. I think that is possible. You have that tropospheric polar vortex, so you do have plenty of cold air. So if you can get a press from that tropospheric polar vortex and time it just right, even though you're going to be in a warmer than normal pattern here in the mid-Atlantic, it doesn't mean that you can't get snow. There's still plenty of cold around. It's just going to be kind of a thread the needle type of situation. Other thing to look at going forward here is the stratosphere. So the stratosphere, you see right here, here is your stratospheric polar vortex. Pretty strong. Now, if we go forward, there is, the GFS ensembles is indicating a little bit of warming and stretching of that stratosphere polar vortex, which could lead to more blocking. There's a little bit of a lag here, usually about 3 weeks or so, but that'll be interesting to watch as well. So going into that second half of February and early March, things could change here, and we could see that cold air filter back into the east with more possible major storm threats. So we'll see. We'll have to see how that develops. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.